Okay, my name is Luis, and my opponent's claim was lax rules and regulations have allowed America's horse racing industry to become dangerous and unhealthy. The first secondary claim was it's common for racehorses now to sustain debilitating injuries because of the starting age they start training, long sessions, and drug side effects. In my response to their first claim is horses starting at a young age, it helps their improvement in the track. From Bloody Horse they say the first 3 years of a horse's life, particularly the first 2, are a time of great change and development in their locomotor system, particularly in the muscles, tendons, and bones. Racehorses tend to only, and then her second evidence to that was the long sections. Racehorses tend to only practice for practices, or they only tend to run for practices and for the races. For the most part, racehorses tend to just stay in the stall, which could be up to 23 hours. Okay. In response to the second claim, which was horses are subject to improper treatment behind doors, such as illegal drugs and harsh training. In harsh training, I said horses are expensive to maintain, and at times it's a person's livelihood. So they wouldn't intentionally hurt the horse because it would make them tons of money, or they could essentially slaughter the animal for income if they have to. Horse racing used to be a self-governing industry. The government gave them a chance, but after a number of incidents, the government finally got involved because they couldn't control themselves. So from the Humane Society of the United States, we have a bill that was passed by Representative Ed Whitfield and Senator Tom Udall of New Mexico, which introduced an Interstate Horse Racing Improvement Act, House Representatives Act 1733-7886, which bans race day medication and racing horses under the influence of performance-enhancing drugs aren't allowed to race, and it's a 3 strikes you're out thing. So once they do it 3 times, they're never allowed to race ever again. And the tests that are done to prove if the horse is on drugs is done by independent labs. The training techniques that are done to each horse varies just like human athletes. They have a basic technique, and then they branch out from that. So determining who's the horse owner will determine how hard they're going on the horse. So, their last claim was the horses have uncertain futures. Once retired, they could either be slaughtered, euthanized, or they have no homes. So my response to that claim was, horses' futures can vary depending on their situation. There was a ban banning the slaughtering of horses from 2006 to 2011. And when this ban was in effect, the ban caused more harm than good. For example, Colorado data showed that investigations for horse neglect and abuse increased more than 60% from 975 in 2005 to 1,588 in 2009. Also, California, Texas, and Florida reported more horses abandoned on private or state land since 2007. These changes have strained resources according to state data and officials that the Government of Accountability Office interviewed. State, local, tribal, and horse industry officials generally attributed this increase in neglect and abandonment to cessation of domestic slaughter and economic downturn. So essentially this ban didn't help at all with the horses because the owners of the horses some of them didn't have enough money to sustain the horses, so the horses were suffering more because they couldn't slaughter them. So this created a loss of revenue. According to the USDA data, facilities two in Texas and 1 in Illinois slaughtered almost 105,000 horses in 2006. This was the last year of operations, and exported more than 17,000 metric tons of horse meat, which is valued at $65 million at the time. Eating horse meat isn't out of the norm in other countries except here. So And then also, there are multiple organizations that have equine sanctuaries, such as the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation, which is the largest in the United States, and there's 23 nationwide. California has something called a program called Karma. Racetracks have partnered up with aftercare organizations so that a percentage of purse money is allocated to retirement, rescue, and retaining organizations, ensuring a kind of retirement fund for horses, essentially requiring every owner to contribute to this. In conclusion, the government has acknowledged the flaws in America's horse racing industry, and they are doing what they can to perfect the industry. But people or animals will always fall in between the cracks.
Right, well, we know what the main issue is, and then you kind of do give us a preview of what those supporting points are. It's not really signposted very clearly as the preview. If you're listening carefully, you'll pick it up. When you get to the body of the speech, you do cite those points a little bit, so that's okay. It does sound like you've got this general argument about some advantage that comes from early training. It's mostly asserted. I'm not sure why it's important. When you tell us that the horses stay stabled or in their stalls for up to 23 hours, okay, so what does that mean? Does that mean that they can't be abused because they're in their stalls? I'm not sure what inference you want us to draw from that point. And there are a couple of other places where you do the same sort of thing. On the improper treatment, you do kind of make this general argument that says that the owner's livelihoods are dependent on this, so there should be a bias or an inclination not to engage in anything that would be problematic for the horses. But I'm not sure that that any of those things that the advocate was talking about would fall in the category of being threatening in the same way. I think you're making a big inference here, and you probably could do with a little bit more information on this. If you could show how the vast majority of horse owners, for instance, behave in a responsible way, or they try to adhere to the rules, or they do particular things with their horses, any of those kinds of things I think would be helpful. And then you've got historical data about the horse race acts and about medications and rules and those sorts of things. And I think that's okay. That does show that we are doing something about it. You're not denying that abuse takes place, but your argument is really an attempt to diminish that abuse and suggest that it occurs largely outside of the mainstream system. That's how I think you need to state that argument, because otherwise you give us a whole bunch of information and again aren't telling us what inference we're supposed to be drawing from it. The ban on horse slaughter I thought was kind of an interesting one, because you say that there are negative consequences to the ban on horse slaughter. So in essence, the advocate doesn't really call for a ban or even suggest that it would be a good thing. They just say that those sorts of things happen. And I think what you probably want to say is the reason they're happening is because people fail to understand the complexity of raising horses and dealing with those issues. And when rules are applied in that ignorance, then you get these unintended consequences, and that we're much better off allowing the industry to regulate itself. I think maybe that's kind of the general inference that you want to be making there. The money that's being brought in by horse slaughter, I don't know that, like I said, I'm not sure why that argument does any good. It's just a question of what conclusion do you want us to draw from all of this stuff on the changes in the horse slaughter. I know generally what you're saying the relationship is, but how does it affect the argument that is being presented, and why would we look at what the advocate's claims were differently? And then you come back down to the argument about we have these standards and they're creating funds to take care of horses and those sorts of things. And I think that's fine. That's a good generic argument that responds to those issues. But sometimes you're not very clear on the inferences that we should be making based on the information that you provided us. All right, thank you.